Hi everyone, Ian Harvey here, massage therapist. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite massage tools, the open fist, or the soft fist, whatever you want to call it. This is one of my favorites because it's very versatile. It involves using relatively straight joints, and so it's very wrist friendly. If you've ever had painful wrists or fingers or thumbs, it might be time to add this tool in. Today we're going to talk about how to use it, some different applications for it, and I'm going to show you a demonstration on a client. If you'd like to skip ahead, check out the time codes in the description. So this is what the soft fist looks like. The phalanges aren't really doing anything, they're just kind of flopping around. The thumb isn't really doing anything, it's hanging out and getting out of the way. We're applying pressure using these metacarpophalangeal joints, the punching knuckles, as well as these posterior surfaces of your proximal phalanges, so these hairy parts of your fingers here. Because this tool does involve the flexion of these fingers at these metacarpophalangeal joints and direct pressure on these joints, this tool can be initially a little uncomfortable. People will feel a little pain between the knuckles here, and they might not enjoy this stretch sensation. I ask that you play with it for a little while and see if you can develop strategies that reduce that and see if that diminishes over time. I can use this as much as I want now, and I never feel any discomfort. Now, if you ever feel straight up pain or a twinge, then back way off. I've got my friend Christina here.
Hey.
So here are a couple of ways of working with the soft fist. So there are two ways of using this open fist. One is with a relatively straight wrist and the knuckles pointed straight down toward the body. So my body weight is resting directly on my metacarpophalangeal joints. This is going to feel sharper. This is going to be great for stripping moves and for trigger point work. The other method is to let this wrist joint collapse into extension just a bit. It's very subtle, not a big movement, but now more of my weight is pressing on these dorsal surfaces of these proximal phalangeal joints. Plenty is still on these knuckles, but now the weight is more distributed. This is a broader feeling move. I like this particular kind of smushed down style of soft fist because it's very useful for nice broad steam rolling moves. All sorts of different ways of working with fascia, just like you would with a palm. And it's just a little less sharp, and it requires less stabilization. When you're using this straight down, direct approach, you may feel a little shaking in your wrist joint, especially at first. So if that happens, you can stabilize that joint by putting the other hand around it. You don't have to clamp down tight, just provide a little bit of support. And there are two different directions that you can use. You can use this parallel direction, where all the knuckles are lined up in the direction that you're using them. So I'm traveling this direction, all the knuckles are lined up behind one another. Or you can use perpendicular knuckles. So this line is across from the direction that I'm moving. I use both, and sometimes one move will morph into the other. And whenever you're using this open fist, still mold to the body. You don't want this to be a rigid structure that you're inflicting upon your client. Instead, follow this roller coaster of the back. As it dips down here, I'm going to change the angle of my wrist. I'm going to come into ulnar deviation, so I'm going to bend this way to follow this curve. As I come into the bottom of this lumbar spine and into the sacrum, I'm going to curve back up. I'm going to come into radial deviation. So never let this be a static tool. Always change the angle of your wrist and the angle of your knuckles to fit that surface under your hand. So here are a few different ways of using this open fist. You've already seen me do this stripping move. I'm starting as high up as possible. As I stand, I'm allowing this joint to be straight, I'm allowing my wrist to be relatively straight, and letting these fingers be smushed a bit. This thumb is staying out of the way, and I'm stripping down these paraspinal muscles. This is useful for working on long strips of muscle. If you find that difficult, or even if you don't, this is an alteration that I like. It's the fist plus a supporting palm. So I'll place my palm, then I'll add the fist in, and the two work together as a unit. They're smashed right against one another. The palm isn't applying a lot of pressure, but it is making this seam broader to the client, and it's giving me a lot of sensory information. So I know exactly where the spinous processes are. I'm not worried at all about butting up against them. So as you're learning this open fist technique, this can be useful. When it gets in the way, just gently remove it. You can use two soft fists at once. So I'm tucking my elbows into my sides. You'll notice that I've been doing that a lot this entire time. It's a very useful way of working with these fists. And I'm allowing these flat, soft fists to do big, broad strips bilaterally down the spinal erectors. My pressure is angled inferiorly down toward the sacrum, down toward the feet. And notice how my wrists are changing shape so that I stay conformed to this surface. To come out of this, you can make this a stripping move that goes down the hips. So I'm just inferior to the iliac crests. And then you can drag your way out of it. You can also use these doubled up soft fists to create a big, broad, fascial steamroller. So you may have seen this in my lower back video, or several other videos I've done this. I like this move because it's easy. I can just use my body weight to make it happen, and it really grabs a lot of tissue. And in this tight thoracolumbar fascia, that can feel pretty darn great. So just another look at that. I'm pulling the skin toward me, so engaging the fascia, you'll hear that called. And then I'm sinking in with my knuckles after I've cleared the spine. So I don't use my knuckles on those spinous processes, that would hurt. And watch as I mold the angle of my wrists to this changing surface under my hands. Don't just use these as blunt objects. And you can do that exact same thing up in this upper back region. So I'm going to pull the skin toward myself, engage that fascia. Then once I've cleared those spinous processes, I'll sink in with those. Now I've got this nice steamroller just by allowing my body weight to come down and pressing toward myself. I'm taking all this upper back fascia and tractioning it toward the axilla. Now there's a lot of interesting stuff under my fists right now. So I'll be changing the angles of my wrists so that I'm not putting any too specific pressure on any part of this scapula. Open fists are also great for working with this scapula. So if I want to work on this broad blade of the scapula, the infraspinous fossa, I can do so just by sinking in with this soft open fist. If I want to make it a more specific stripping, I can put the weight into my metacarpophalangeal joints, my punching knuckles. So how sharp you want this to feel is completely changed by how straight this wrist joint is. So this is a relatively broad feel, but if I really want to work specifically with infraspinatus, I can come into my knuckles. I can strip up the teres muscles, and you'll notice that I am allowing my knuckles to become quite collapsed here. If this isn't comfortable for you, don't let them become that collapsed. You'll initially find that this much stretch, this much flexion, might be a little uncomfortable, but that should change over time. If that doesn't change for you, or if it's just unpleasant or painful, then don't use your fist like that. Don't let them become that smashed. Now you can use these open fists anywhere on the body. This is how I would use it while working with the IT band. I'm going to be using kind of this smashed fist instead of the more direct work with my knuckles, because I don't want this to be too sharp. And notice how all of this effort is being driven by my hip. My elbow is resting right on my thigh, and to keep this moving, I simply move my stance this way. You can shuffle your feet, you can go into a deeper lunge. At no point am I having to use my pecs to make this happen. And just to show you how versatile this move can be, this is a nice way of warming up the neck and of finishing neck work. So you can use your wrists at all sorts of different angles. You can change from that straighter knuckle position to that flatter knuckle position, and you can change the direction of your knuckles as you use them. You can morph from this soft fist into using these other knuckles, these door-knocking knuckles. Just when you're making all these changes, don't do it when you're using a lot of pressure. Okay guys, let me know what you think. Leave me some comments in the comments section, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.